What's up, world-renowned family? Neal Oates Jr. here. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Velvet Rope. So here's what I want to just mention to you all. First, I want to say thank you for another successful year of life. 2024 has been a fantastic year. It's had its ups. It's had its downs as well, but we are still here. And that is a testament in and of itself. So I want to tell you all that we've gotten to experience some pretty cool things here in the year. Myself, my wife, my team, and I. So whether it was being able to speak at some national conferences, some big time platforms, from the CRS celebration, attending the event for Star Power there in Nashville, Tennessee, Vegas, we did for celebration, and then getting booked and asked to keynote some of those same events in 2025. We have some big things on the horizon. Over the past month to close out the year, I did receive a prestigious award from the National Association of Realtors, the Certified International Property Specialist Instructor of the Year. So that's no small feat. And so the reason I bring that to you is because these things have happened in what I would consider a whirlwind. And as I have taught classes or I have met with you face to face, whether it was as an instructor, a colleague, speaker, or some of your business executive coaching that I have performed for my clientele, the question has come up, Neal, how do you do everything? How are you getting as much done in the same amount of time as we are? And so this is where I'm going to share with you all my framework, the idea that I use to go through life, to go through business. And I'm going to be speaking to it specifically in terms of luxury, affluent clientele, those high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals that are my wheelhouse, my ideal clients. And then I want you to filter that framework through different parts of your life, your business, and so that you can use this information so that you can make 2025 all that you would hope it would be. So what framework do I use to make decisions, to know how to go about creating this idea or this life of success? Well, my framework goes back to a U.S. Air Force Colonel John Boyd. And if you know U.S. Air Force Colonel John Boyd, you know that I am talking about the OODA Loop, OODA. Now, we are not going to be talking about military strategy. We're not talking about combative measures here, but the whole idea of the OODA Loop is what helps me in my day-to-day business, helps me frame my life week to week, month to month, and ultimately year to year. So I hope that as we discuss the OODA Loop and how I use it in my business, you'll be able to take some nuggets, maybe scratch out some notes, and then figure out in your reflection time as 2024 closes how you can best use the OODA Loop to get some of your best results for the upcoming year. So the first place to start is the beginning. I've found that's typically one of two places to start. Either start at the beginning or start where you are. So for us, we have the luxury of starting from the beginning, and that is for us to explain and understand what the OODA Loop is. So OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And ultimately, that's as simple as life gets. Observe, orient, decide, and act. If nothing else, today, ladies and gentlemen, if you will observe, orient, decide, and act, you will find yourself miles ahead of the competition. You will see that when you look to your left and to your right, that you are standing in rarefied air. The company that you're going to be keeping is that of the elite few and not the mediocre many. So let's start with observe. Observe means to gather information about the environment, situation, and any changes that might be occurring. This includes analyzing external conditions, potential threats, and opportunities. So, for my business minds out there, when we use our first O in the OODA loop, observe, this is probably where we're going to sit down and do that SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis doesn't necessarily have to be about business. The SWOT analysis could be about your life, your relationships, your health. For me, I'm using my SWOT analysis when identifying the landscape of the coaching realm, speaking, training, real estate, working with affluent clientele in any of those, or if I'm going to be with my 16-year-old son. Maybe I look at the SWOT analysis when I observe the relationship with wife and I, or the kids that I volunteer with. I even do my SWOT analysis and observe how you are going to interact with this video, with the topics and the information that I'm going to share. So we want to make sure we observe. The second O is going to be orient. And here's what orient means. It means to use the information gathered to make sense of the situation. This step involves synthesizing data with prior knowledge, experiences, and cultural factors to frame the context and determine potential actions. So once you orient yourself or your client, customer, or you start understanding the information that you observed, that's going to help us with the next part of the puzzle, and that is to decide. Choose a course of action based on the observations and orientation of yourself, your client, the issue, problem, or opportunity. This decision is informed by the analysis conducted in the first two steps. So if we are going to do this properly, our decisions should be based on the observations and the orientation, and then we want to make accurate decisions. But wait, we are not finished once we decide, because it is one thing to observe, orient, and decide. That's just an OOD. Might be the most important, and that is to act or to execute. Act, execute the decision, and monitor the results. This action creates new conditions, and then we'll start that loop all over again. So here's what we are going to do. We are going to take this OODA loop to answer and address some of the questions, concerns that have been posed to me over the past 4 to 7 months from my clients and colleagues. They're asking me, Neal, how is it that you're going to work with affluent clientele? How can you use the OODA loop to set yourself apart and really position ourselves as the best? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to picture in your mind that you're going to be meeting with a high net worth individual. And in the middle of the conversation, they're going to shift their focus. You know the presentation that you're going to give, or you know how you had this planned out in your heart and in your head. And all of a sudden, as oftentimes happen, they throw you a curveball, and something that was unexpected comes about. You are shuffling through your notes and you're saying, I did not see this coming. Well, what are you going to do? I hope that your first instinct, especially after watching this video or listening to this episode, is going to be to go into OODA mode. And here's what OODA mode is. You're going to observe, orient, decide, and take appropriate action. So here's what this looks like in the affluent realm. The first part of our observation is to gather information. Now, some of it might be historical data, could be we go in and do research, but more likely than not, when the OODA loop becomes a necessity, is in real-time situations. When you're out during a consultation, presentation, when you are networking, and then you must decide, hey, I need to make observation. Let me see what's happening real time. How are they dressed? What vehicle do they drive? What does their wrist look like? Maybe they have a demeanor about themselves, or their aura might be a little bit off. Are you keen enough to say, I can observe what's happening real time? Can you decide or can you determine if someone is full of energy or maybe they're down just a little bit? So I want to give you all an example of what one of my clients had. So I'm going to read to you all what she did in a recent interaction with an ultra high net worth individual. A real estate agent once told me that she learned that her affluent client preferred privacy above all else. So we know that privacy is a major concern for many of our ultra high net worth individuals. Instead of showcasing properties through traditional open houses, she arranged exclusive invite-only showings. This insight came from observing the client's hesitance to discuss personal matters publicly. And so that's one of the things that we as service providers for the affluent clientele who understand the mind of those who are highly successful, we're going to pick up what they put down. Maybe it's not going to be just blatant or overtly saying something. Maybe you have to read between those lines where you're going to see how they operate. We're going to look at some of their lifestyle indicators that I mentioned. Where do they spend their leisure time? This might be one of the best ways for you to identify how to operate, how to leverage some of your skills, talent, some of their desires. Now, what do they volunteer their time with when they're not in the course of business? What are some of the charities that have their hearts and their minds? Also, observation is going to require a level of awareness to subtle keys, to subtle ideas, subtle information, conversation, how they like to prioritize certain words. Do they use words like legacy, impact, privacy? Or are they going to be on the opposite end of the spectrum where their personality might lend more to a flashier, showy lifestyle? Maybe they care about the experience more than privacy. Maybe they care about impact more than experience, right? And so all of these are going to be things that are necessary for us to observe the affluent clientele that we're working with. Now, I do want to take this moment to remind you that while I'm speaking of observing, working with affluent clientele, and we're going to run through this OODA loop from that viewpoint, maybe for you, you have to apply OODA in a different context or different segment of your life or business. So now that we have observed, we're going to see how we orient based on the information that we have received. And to orient means that we synthesize the data, the information, that we now take it, what we have received, and put it into usable form. I tell everyone that it's one thing to gather information. It is something totally different to be able to use that information, to compile that info, those experiences into usable, profitable means. And if you can do that, I believe next to communication and negotiation, being able to synthesize and disseminate information in a profitable and intelligent way might be the most important skill. So one of my executive coaching clients was meeting with and one of their clients, and she is a financial consultant, and she heard a word that kept coming up in a consultation with her client, and it was future proofing. I want to future proof. I want to future proof. So what did she do? Immediately, she observed and then she oriented saying, I must now know that future proofing, that generational talk, that a lasting impact is going to be important to my client. So did she continue down the road of her initial presentation and consultation? The answer is absolutely not. So what she did instead was she adjusted and said, now that I have understanding, I have the information of what's important to my client, to my customer, let me adjust. So a way that we can orient ourselves in this niche of working in the luxury realm is going to be compare one client with others with similar profiles while avoiding stereotypes. So as an instructor for international real estate, we're always talking about the fair housing principles. And I call this my fair housing box, where we want to use generalizations and similarities when it comes to profiles, but we want to avoid stereotypes. This is where, when we talk about observing, have you been able to observe profiles? Do you have an idea of, based on their disc profile, Myers-Briggs, lifestyle, their relationship with money? There are many profiles that you, as a service provider, entrepreneur, or business owner, that you can pick up on without violating any fair housing or best practices, and without violating any of the stereotype hazards that we want to be careful of. And so I'm going to encourage you, look back in your business, look back in your life, in your experiences, and say, where have I been able to orient based on previous experience and previous knowledge? And then it talks about here where we want to incorporate broader market trends to anticipate concerns such as rising interest rates or a shift in luxury spending habits. Now, this is when we want to use that historical or trend data to anticipate what might happen in the future. Once we observe, say, hey, I've seen this before, or this is not the first time this has happened. What could I do based on previous results or previous action? Maybe they aren't your own. Maybe it's going to be someone that you're learning from, or it could just be from the contents of a book. So we want to use the observation and the orientation that's going to lead into the decide. So observe, orient, and now we're going to decide, ladies and gentlemen. And here's what I believe about deciding. Deciding is important, but it's not the most important. But before we can go anywhere, we must stop right here with the decide. So we want to choose a specific personalized approach based on what you've observed and oriented. And it is important that it is personalized. The affluent, the successful, they want one of one service. It must be unique. It must be tailored to them. One of the great things, one of the great compliments that I have received numerous times from my affluent coaching clients and my successful real estate clients is, Neal, you treat us like we are your only client. That's how I know that I'm getting it right. So let me ask you this question. When you're working with the uber successful, when you are working with the high net worth or ultra high net worth individuals, with those who are affluent, are you offering them not only service, but are you offering them a touch of customer service, something that is going to be above and beyond? Are you offering them that feeling that it is going to be specific, personalized, and unique? A financial advisor decided to craft a bespoke investment portfolio for a client after learning their passion for sustainable living. They incorporated green investments and socially responsible ventures into the strategy, aligning perfectly with the client's values. So, what does that mean for one of my clients? It means that their client felt heard, felt valued. They knew that this was not just a portfolio of just take whatever is a good return on investment. Let me help you with those investments that are close to your heart. Let me assist you, personalize and customize something that is going to align with your beliefs. I have this saying that if you can get people's heart, they will give you their money. The challenge and the opportunity is to identify what has their heart. Well, now that we know how to observe and orient, deciding to do that thing that will get their heart is probably going to result more oftentimes than not in getting their money, their resources, and their trust as well. And so here are two guidelines when it comes to how do we decide when it comes to working with the affluent. Clearly present options that balance exclusivity and practicality. So when the uber successful hire you and I, they want exclusivity. They want that unique thing, but it also must be practical. So you and I, we get to do the fun and challenging work of balancing those two, making them meet so that it is a win for you as the service provider and for the clientele that we're going to be serving. And then we want to use decision-making tools to evaluate the best course of action, such as offering tiered solutions. So not a one size fits all, not even a one of one fits you, where we might have a tiered solution. It could be in compensation or in the marketing piece. Maybe you have a tiered communication structure for those that you're going to be serving. So that's going to really help us. And then finally, when it comes to the observe, orient, decide, act. Without action, nothing happens. This goes back to the story of three frogs were sitting on a log. Two of them decided to jump off. How many frogs were left on the log? And the answer was three. Why? Because the two that decided to jump never took any action. And I don't want you to be a frog sitting on a log or not a frog at all. So now when we think about completing this OODA loop, is imperative that we act. And so we want to deliver on promises with exceptional attention to detail, and then we're going to monitor those outcomes. So why exceptional attention to detail? Because if we act with intentionality and if we're going to monitor the outcomes, it is a higher likelihood that those that we serve of the affluent and successful niche will be pleased with us enough to know that we've put thought into it. One of my clients is a travel concierge. She designed a luxury vacation for an ultra high net worth family. But here's what she did. She didn't just book a five-star hotel. She arranged a private villa, curated meals with a personal chef, and scheduled exclusive excursions. Their execution or her execution ensured a seamless and memorable experience. And how did she get to this action? She got to this action because she observed the lifestyle. She listened in to some of the conversations and what was said in terms of what their ultimate goals or what they valued more than the money spend was a phenomenal experience. She oriented herself and the needs or desires of the client with the situation. She made a decision to deliver exceptional service, and then the action went from not only booking or planning a trip, but making sure that there were villas, private chef for the food, and then also excursions that were exceptional. And so how do we act exceptionally? How do we act in the OODA loop that's going to impress and exceed the expectations of the affluent clientele that we serve? First, we're going to communicate every step of the process to build confidence. It is important that oftentimes we understand people will be okay with the process or the outcome as long as we communicate what the process or the desired outcome will be. So it's vitally important for you and I as service providers to the affluent, to the successful, that we communicate every step of the process. Set that expectation so they know when we are moving to the next step, or if we need to tweak because something didn't happen exactly as we expected it to. And then we want to ensure that execution aligns with the client's lifestyle and their expectation. This is why we go back to communicating the entire process, because it's better for us to find out that a part of our execution doesn't align with their expectations or their goals before we actually execute the plan. So I cannot stress that enough. And now that we have a completed OODA loop, that we have observed, oriented, decided, and acted, what do? we run the OODA loop again. So this is where we refine the cycle. We're going to loop back. And this is where we reflect on outcomes and refine the approach for the next interaction. And this is the beautiful part about the OODA loop. You heard me say the next interaction. This does not mean the next client, customer, prospect. This means the next time we interact with that same affluent, successful individual. So it could be for a sales call on a Monday and then a face-to-face on a Thursday. We have to keep running this OODA loop over and over again. And if we do that, here's what I know. I know that you're going to have amazing results. You're going to find yourself doing more business, having greater relationships, and receiving more referrals with those who are like the ideal clients that we serve. So I want to encourage you as we wrap up this episode and we wrap up 2024 to leverage the OODA loop to exceed the expectations of the affluent clientele. If you're just getting ready to break into the space of working with affluent clientele, be sure to complete the Affluent Attraction Analyzer quiz, because I want to know what you need, where your business is, and how I could assist you in doing that. For everyone here, here's what I need. First, be sure to comment on this video. I need your feedback to complete my OODA loop so that I can better serve you as you better serve others. Most importantly, be sure to subscribe to make sure that you're getting this valuable quality content on a regular basis. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss anytime an episode is going to be posted. But most importantly, share this with someone who you think would benefit from the quality and caliber of conversation that we're going to have. Now, I must tell you, as I always do before I go, and that is that I love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time I see you or you see me, don't be average, be world renowned. Peace.